Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. How do you scan around 2,000 drawings quickly? That's a question that I had as well. And that is because for the last 10 years, I've been doing watercolor drawings every morning after breakfast. And it has crossed my mind over the years that maybe there's a fire, maybe there's a flood, who knows? But all of that work could go down on one single day. And so I had to somehow digitize all of those drawings, those paintings. But there was no quick and easy way. For one, the paper gets warped because there's so much of watercolor put into it, so it's a bit up and down. But there's the problem of a traditional scanner, which is you have to open the flap and put the book and then scan the book and then close the scanner and open the scanner, and you know what I'm getting at because you've done it before. And recently I found a scanner that I could sit at my dining table and go flip, flip, flip. Well, it wasn't that quick. I still had to use some kind of blue tack to hold the pages down, but I've managed to scan about 5 years of drawings in about 10 to 15 sessions. And to me, that's fast, that's quick, that's speed. And today we're going to look at a different kind of speed, but something that we have to do regularly, just like that scanning bit, we have to put out a newsletter. How do we create a newsletter, or how do we create a structure of a newsletter so that week after week or fortnight after fortnight, that's 15 days by the way, so fortnight after fortnight, we can put out a newsletter. Let's look at the 4 points that we're going to cover today. Not 3, 4. The first point is the focus of the newsletter. The second is to dig deep for stories, usually a personal story, but also an analogy. The third is the action. And the fourth is to have a postscript, which we know as a PS. Let's start out with the first one, which is the focus of the newsletter. And let's take an example of a cafe that doesn't sell info products and it doesn't sell webinars and seminars and training, but sells physical products and needs to be a service. Let's take that example and start out with what is the focus of the newsletter. Usually the best place to start is with a theme. So a cafe could go with beans, and they could go the magic of the bean roasting process, how coffee plants are grown on low slopes and how they have to go to higher slopes because of climate change, the acidity of beans and how it affects taste, and the roasting machine. So that covers 4 separate newsletters. And you would say that's a month's worth of work just there, just with 4 topics based on one theme, which is beans. And in probably under 10 or 12 minutes, you've finished a month's worth of topics just like that, just over a cup of coffee. So we've done this really quickly. Let's go to the second part. In the second part, we're looking at how do we make this slightly personal? When you look at any kind of information, say we are talking about beans in this case, there is always going to be some very interesting information about the beans, the roasting process, all of that, that's interesting. But we can ramp it up so much by putting in a personal story. And the reason for a personal story is stories tend to be stories because they have ups and downs and diversions and back on the road. And so when we take just the magic of bean roasting and we say how I burned a whole bunch of beans plus the magic of bean roasting, and immediately that personal story makes you the hero. But it also kind of entangles you with the reader. The reader wants to know, how did this turn out? So we'll go through some of those titles. How I burned a whole bunch of beans plus the magic of bean roasting. The second one, my adventures in Colombia and how coffee is grown on the lower slopes. The third, the Barista Championship and how acidity affects the taste. And the fourth, the first client to the cafe and the roasting machine for the beans. So what we've taken here in this second section is something very simple, which is whatever that topic that you're covering about beans, and then we put it a little personal story. And yes, the story doesn't come to your mind right away. And you let it simmer for the rest of the day. What you're going to find is that that story will pop up, or you'll be talking to someone about something and then you'll remember a story. And so what we've done very quickly is we've got the topics, that theme, then we've added a personal story. The third part is the action. Yes, stories are nice. Yes, themes are nice. Yes, topics are nice, but you want them to do something. And so that takes us to the action. Let's look at those very 4 points and then add some action to it. So it's how I burned a whole bunch of beans, plus the magic of bean roasting. And here's the action. Come to the cafe and see the raw beans and the roasted ones. So you've given them something to do, something specific that they need to do. The second one, my adventure in Colombia, how coffee is grown on the lower slopes, etc. And check out where the beans come from the packaging, which is in the store. We'll show you some of the packaging. So again, you're inviting the customers to come into the store and look at the packaging, and you're involving them a bit more. The third is the Barista Championship, how acidity affects the taste, plus take home a tasting kit so that you can try different types of coffee for yourself and see which one suits you the best. And the fourth one, which is the first client to the cafe, plus the roasting machine for the beans, plus taste the filtered coffee, even if you prefer coffee with milk. And we've covered 3 steps already. We started with a theme, we wrote out 4 topics, we added a personal story. We then made sure that they had some action to take. With a cafe, it was about inspecting bags or looking at this kind of coffee or taking home something. With a website, you have them go to a page, look at some specific cartoon, or, there's something that you can get them to do, not necessarily the same thing, but there's always an action that you're looking at. So now we have this 3-part format. That takes us to the last part, which is the PS. And people are often mystified. Why is there a PS? Why is there a postscript? And that is because people tend to read everything, or they skim through everything, and then there is a space. And below that space, that white space, there is a single line, which is easy to read. And so most of us, if we get down to that space, so you want to put in some interesting information in that PS. Often people put in the action, but we've already put in the action, so maybe there's something else that we could put in. So say the first one could be, we have coffee jelly too. Or did you know that we were the Metro top cafe for many years running? Or did you know that this cafe was once a printing press? What we're doing in that PS is then engaging the reader just a little bit more. If you've looked at the PS on psychotactics and 5000 BC newsletters, what you'll find is that there's always some kind of action happening, but it doesn't always have to be action. If you've already covered the action, just put in something interesting, and you've kept that engagement going. And in 4 very simple steps, you've kind of finished off that newsletter. A client who runs a cafe, so this is a real example. She used to spend weeks trying to get one newsletter out. And then we had these 4 points, and bingo, it's like that scanner. Suddenly, it's not as much drudgery and frustration as before. So let's summarize. What are the 4 things that we have to do? First, sit down, write a theme, just a theme. I'm going to cover beans this month, or I'm going to cover internet marketing. No, not such a wide topic. Narrow it down to something like headlines. You're going to cover beans this month, or headlines this month, or Something like that, but a little narrowed down is always better. So you write your starting headline, which is about roasting beans. The second step would be to add your personal story to it, because that always endears you to the reader. It always gets them involved with your life, your business. The third thing is the action. And the fourth is the PS. And that's pretty much it. That brings us to the end of this podcast. But what's the one thing that you can do? Well, the one thing that you can do and you should do is something that we haven't covered in this podcast. And that is that the planning becomes the most crucial of all. When we are writing a newsletter, we tend to think, okay, I'm going to write a newsletter today. That's not the way professionals do things. That's not the way people who want to move quickly do things. What they do is they take this like a chef would do in any, big kitchen. And the chef would now go, okay, I'm going to the supermarket. I'm going to buy the vegetables. I'm going to come back. I'm going to wash them. I'm going to cut them. I'm going to cook them. It's not one big process. It's a whole bunch of steps. And so you want to do all of these things on different days. You start out with the topics, do nothing, relax, have a coffee, then go to the topics or one of the topics on the next day, and then add the next thing, which is the story. Then the third day, add the action. Then the fourth day, add something else. And by Friday, if you start on Monday, this has not become that tedious, frustrating job that you always thought a newsletter was going to be or has been. It's quite simple in these 4 stages. So the one thing that I would recommend every single time is to go through this in stages, and you will find that it's not that hard to put out a newsletter. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Let's find out what's happening in Psychotactics land. It's already November, which means it's time to put up the Christmas tree, right? You'd think not, but that's what happens at my place. For well over 25 years now, the Christmas tree has come up before my birthday, which is on the 2nd of November. And this was back in Mumbai as well. And then when we moved here and my nieces started to grow up, then they would show up and we would decorate the Christmas tree, take photos. So that's kind of a pre-sale, a run-up to just the birthday. There is all of this activity that says birthday is coming. And often when we're trying to sell something, we don't realize the importance of the run-up activity, just like a plane taking off. The plane doesn't just take off. There are a whole bunch of steps. The steps start from the point you bought the ticket, and then you're going to the airport, and then you're in check-in, and then you're through security and through immigration, and then getting on the plane and the plane on the runway. And when you get in the air, that's when the plane has taken off. And that's kind of what you have to do when you're selling a product or service, which is what we cover in the course on pre-sale. And the course on pre-sale is sold on the 21st of November, and you have to be on the waiting list. So go to psychotactics.com and look for pre-sale, because that is one of the things that people don't do. They put a lot of emphasis on a sales page. They think, oh, the sales page it's really important, and it is. I mean, people still have to read what they're buying into. But a lot of it is all of those steps before you get to the sales page. And if you do your job really well, then the sales page just becomes one of those steps and not the most crucial of those steps. So go to psychotactics.com, look for pre-sale, and that's pretty much it. That's on the 21st of November. If you miss that one, then it's all the way into 2021. And yes, once you get the course on pre-sale, you can join us in 5000 BC. You can ask the questions that come up while you're creating your own campaign, while you're setting up your own system. That's what 5000 BC is for, to ask all the questions, to get that clarification. Not like Google, where you ask a question and you get these generic answers, but answers for your specific situation. Plus, there are other articles on pre-sale, as you'd expect, in 5000 BC. So that's it. I'm off. I've got my Spanish lesson in 5 minutes. 3 minutes, actually. I'll say bye for now. Bye-bye, and see you in 5000 BC. Still listening? The cafe that we covered is Arc Coffee, and we've been going there for, I think, 5 years now. I used to go there when I was a cartoonist, and I used to get my cartoons cut out there because it truly was a printing press. And I used to make all of these promotional calendars, which I would send out to clients on a regular basis, month after month, not all together, but month after month. And so month after month, I had to go to the printing press and cut them into a specific shape, so a specific size, so they could fit in an envelope, and then they could be sent out. That's how I know that the cafe was a printing press. But then many years later, I stumbled on it when I was picking up my niece Marcia from school. I had a little extra time, had gone to the barber's next door, and I stumbled on this cafe, and we've been going there ever since. Makes great coffee. If you live on the North Shore in Auckland, go there, have a coffee. And yes, it is one of the top cafes in Auckland. I'll say bye for now and see you at our coffee. Bye-bye.